Good morning, everybody. I'm Ronnie Johnson. I'm a professor in the counseling department at the University of Montana, and as Emily said, a provider of mental health counseling services on the Public Health Workplace Wellness Grant. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. And my name is Jen Roscoe, and I'm one of the counselors that also provides services for the Montana Public Health Training Center. And we're just so happy to be here and be invited to do this class. And again, a huge appreciation to Emily for the tech support. It seems like I always need a little help fumbling through our Zoom world. So thanks, Emily. All right, well, let's get started. We are going to move into what you're learning today. And, it's so interesting, conflict. It's just one of these normal parts of our lives and of our relationships. And today we're going to talk about just how to prime for relationships and being more effective in our conflict and how to manage it. And we wanted to bring up styles of conflict with this, with the insight of it, that there's lots of ways to shift and notice how to be. And then we're going to move into intrapersonal methods for managing conflict. And, what the heck does that word even mean, intrapersonal? One trick I always use to try to remember that word is it's internal. So it's your internal dialogue with yourself and, how invaluable that is for self-comprehension and also self-development. And then we'll move into interpersonal methods for managing conflict. And I always remember there's an ER. Okay, that means two people. So that's how I remember that one. Communication occurs between two people or more. It's just essential for creating meaningful relationships and also understanding different points of view. So anything you want to add with this, Ronnie?
No, thanks, Jen.
Gotcha.
So the first thing that we really want to just normalize is conflict. So often, I think we think of conflict as a negative thing, like it's something that causes stress in a relationship. It's something that is difficult and sometimes damaging to relationships. And really, we just want to dispel that myth, because while those things are true in terms of yes, conflict can be something that damages a relationship, and it absolutely can be difficult, it can also be really positive and constructive. And so that's what one of our hopes is for today, is to arm you with some strategies that can help make your conflict more productive and to make conflict feel less scary and less damaging to our relationships. And we're going to be talking about conflict in terms of interpersonal relationships, like friendships or romantic relationships, and also workplace relationships, because this content can really generalize to all different types of relationships. But really, we want to just share with you that conflict is normal. And it results from any unrealized wish in a relationship where one person wants something to be one way and another person wants it to be another way. And one person may not get exactly what they want, and there is where we have conflict. Sometimes conflict can come from relational dialectics or opposing forces, like one person in a relationship who wants more autonomy while another person wants connection, where one person feels a little bit more comfortable just keeping their emotions to themselves and not expressing themselves a lot, whereas the other person might really value openness and expressing a lot of emotion and feelings and thoughts. There are lots of other relational dialectics, but basically this just speaks to what our needs and comfort levels are in relationships and how those can be different based on who are in the relationship. Conflict can also come just from stress, like when we're tired or we're not feeling well or we're anxious or we're hungry. It's important when we're approaching a difficult conversation or when we find ourselves in conflict to just take a pause and be like, okay, am I hungry? Am I tired? What could be the source of this conflict? So as we're thinking about conflict as a normal part of all relationships, we'd like to shift from this idea of conflict resolution to the idea of conflict management. because conflict resolution is not necessarily a realistic goal. Conflict is normal and it will happen in all relationships. What we want to develop skills around is how we manage it. So we're going to offer you a poll right now. What percent of conflict do you think is solvable in any given relationship? So Emily's going to put up some options here. Let us know what your best guess is. What percent of conflict is solvable? So 10%, 30%, 70%, or 100%. Okay, so about half of us think that 70% of conflict is solvable. About 21% think 30%, 29% think 100%. So the correct answer is 30%. So only 30% of conflict, particularly in romantic relationships, but this does generalize to other relationships as well, is solvable, which means that 70% of conflicts that we have in our relationships are perpetual, or are conflicts that will continue to come up over and over and over again. So that's not meant to be discouraging. It's meant to be encouraging. Like if we're going to have these conflicts over and over again, or if we're going to approach these similar issues in our relationships, let's figure out some ways to manage them. And that's really what our goal is today. And one of the things that we hope is that as we're approaching conflict, that we'll take a we approach, that we'll develop some compassion and understanding for folks that we're in conflict with, so that we can be more collaborative and less competitive in terms of trying to get our needs met in conflict.
Thanks so much for that, Ronnie. And, conflict is normal, and we're just going to kind of move into the nature of conflict now. And noticing that, there's two different types. There's negative conflict and positive conflict. And so let's just zone in a little bit on negative. We've all been there, right? That single disagreement or that argument, and it doesn't feel good. There's chronic difficulty within relationships, and this can be, through relationships at work, it can be with friends, it can be with loved ones. Clashing of personalities. Yeah, that happens, right? Noticing that maybe a personality might not fit with another one, and that often relates to values, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Verbal abuse, harassment, bullying, any unethical or unfair behavior that really disrupts yourself, your team, your work, or your family. And so, who's ever heard of positive conflict? That kind of sounds funny, but it's true. It does exist. Conflict can be helpful. One way is in connection with competition. And this really shows where people strive, and it motivates, and they work harder towards their goals. And we see this starts really young in life, with kids are intrinsically motivated usually to run as fast as they can for that soccer ball. And this can be helpful in creating just a strong sense of internal motivation. Oh gosh, sorry about that. Did I just do that? Oh, okay. The other thing is struggling to choose between different strategies. And so, yeah, this makes sense that, sometimes we're trying to pick what is the best option for us, and moving into our own internal world and trying to figure out what feels good through our intuition and through just reading the room and our emotional intelligence. Positive conflict can also be about your team, and finding out, who has the right mix for the certain task at hand, and how can we honor that and give that person the ball and let them run with it. And also opinions with others. Sometimes opinions can come up, and people can really move through figuring out what is a new strategy, what is a new approach, and moving forward. And, we just wanted to give you this. This is just where you can find out more about this on this blog. And we put it at the end. We have a handout that has all these resources. So this will be on the resource that you can access if you're interested more about that. Any thoughts, Ronnie? All right.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for explaining those, Jen.
You're
I think,
welcome. You're
I
welcome.
think you did a great job. And I think it's just important to differentiate between what is negative conflict and what is positive conflict so that we can more easily know, like, okay, this is the kind of conflict that I can get that can be constructive so that we don't have some of those. Think conflict can feel scary for a lot of people, and we learn about conflict from our families of origin, and depending upon how conflict was handled in our families when we were growing up, sometimes conflict can seem scary. So being able to differentiate what kind of conflict we're facing can help us enter those conversations a little more productively.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, well, I've kind of touched my screen a couple times and I don't see my little thingies to move forward. Oh, I did it.
Oh,
Okay.
they're perfect.
Did it.
Hey.
All right. Okay, so the thing to help us when we're approaching conflict, both in the ways that we react and the ways that we understand how whoever we're in conflict with is reacting, is looking at conflict as expression of a value. And if any of you have attended any of our other trainings, I think values always come up. You're probably like, oh, great, we're talking about values again. Yes, we're talking about values again because they're that important and they motivate our behavior. And so if we can understand that underneath every conflict, for everybody involved in the conflict, underneath that conflict is a value, that can help us to both better articulate ourselves and our needs and our requests in terms of conflict management, but it can also help us understand where our relationship partners or our coworkers or our friends might be coming from. So John Gottman is a relationship researcher and a counselor who is from the University of Washington. He's been doing research on couple relationships for the last 40 years. And he's come up with some pretty amazing research. Again, if you've attended any of our other sessions, we usually talk about Gottman a little bit. We're going to show just a really brief video where Gottman describes how you can begin to understand this idea that values underlie all conflicts. And he quotes, I don't know if he says it in this particular video or if he said it in another one, but I just love this idea that conflict happens in relationships because it's so rooted in our values that we can't possibly give them up, especially those conflicts that are more perpetual, the things that 70% of conflict that we continue to come back to over and over again. It's really rooted in our values. It's deep within our core and we can't give up our bones. And that's why like conflict is, those values are as deeply rooted in us as our internal organs and our bones. And so I think it's helpful to just think of values that way, because that's why people get so stuck, is because they just can't give those things up. So Jen's going to show us this little video and then we'll have a little activity around it.
In which I think our point of view is very different from a lot of other points of view in sort of family-oriented therapy, is that when you see people in gridlock, a lot of times when you look at them from the outside, they look like they're really immature, you know, and maybe they're arrested at some previous level of emotional development. You know, they're 4 years old instead of being grown up talking about this. Or they're playing games, or they're being manipulative or uncompromising. And, you know, there's something really wrong with the system. The marital system is pathological or sick. But we don't believe any of that stuff. I mean, it's not that we don't believe that there is, you know, depression and things like that that really need to be addressed. But for most gridlock marital problems, what we really tell people is no wonder you couldn't yield on this problem. We think that in each of these fists, if you made the marriage safe enough and opened up the fist, there would be something beautiful inside. That people are not compromising because ostensibly they may be talking, say, about money or finances. But underneath, they're actually also talking about basic philosophical concepts and what we call life dreams. So yeah, they're talking about money and finances, but they're also talking about freedom and power and security and what love means.
Sorry about that. I was trying to turn it up. Oh, it looks like it's all the way up. Okay.
And what a family means and what it means to be who I am. and what it means to give to the world and to build community and charity and making the world a better place. So yeah, they're gridlocked about money, and they seem to be talking about money, but underneath they're talking about these very basic philosophical issues that are very central to each person's personality and their thoughts about themselves. So they can't yield any more than somebody could yield if somebody came over to you and said, excuse me, may I borrow your bones? You know, you can't give people the bones, your bones. You can't yield on this position because it's giving up the bones of who you are.
All right.
So Gottman is talking about marriage. He's talking about romantic relationships. But I think this is really true. This is generalizable to other relationships as well. We just can't give up those really deeply seated values that we have. And that's how conflict comes about, is when we feel like those are threatened. And if you think about the workplace, you could think about things like integrity or conscientiousness or a commitment to getting a task completed. Like when those things that are really important to us are compromised, that can be a place where conflict can emerge. So what we want you to think about is the last conflict you had. And it could be any kind of relational conflict, workplace conflict, romantic relationship, friendship, family relationship. What stands out to you when you think about, like, gosh, what was this, what conflict is on your mind as Jen and I are moving through some of this content today? And take a moment to look at this list of values, which is a very abbreviated list, and see if any of these values were underneath that conflict for you. So I want you to take a minute and just reflect and kind of look at these, and you can absolutely identify values that are not on this list. That's fine. As I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but think about what was underneath that conflict for you. We're going to give you a minute to reflect on it. Just maybe jot a couple things down. What values can you identify that were underneath that last conflict for you? And then we're going to give you 5 minutes. We're going to put you in breakout rooms of about 3 people each, and we'll give you about 5 minutes to just discuss, like, how did you identify this value? Does identifying this value change anything for you about the conflict in terms of your understanding of why it was so important to you? We just want to give you a chance to talk about it a little bit. So take a moment to just reflect, jot down a couple values that you might identify underneath that conflict, and then we'll put you in breakout rooms for a few minutes. Welcome back. I hope that you had a chance to talk about kind of what are your bones? What were your bones in that conflict? If you're willing, can you just pop in the chat, what value stood out to you when you thought about that conflict and you tried to identify what was underneath it? What value did you come up with? We're so curious if we can just come up with a list of what's happening for the group. I see understanding, independence, freedom, competence and strength, emotions. Yeah, integrity. Excellent. Honesty, integrity, respect, another respect, integrity. Yeah. So what I'm noticing is there's some duplicates, and it's possible that when you're in conflict with someone, you might have similar values and they're being expressed in different ways. I see another integrity, stability, achievement. So when we get to being able to identify those values, and in relationships that are safe enough to be able to share those or identify, help our relationship partners, whoever they might be, identify what is important to them, what's underneath the conflict, that can give us a place where we can soften and start to talk about it. So thank you for engaging in this activity. I see another achievement, being mindful, respectful. Yeah, like these are values that everybody can get on board with, right? I think that's the thing that's really tricky about conflict, is that it's easy to disagree with someone's opinion or how they want to do things. But when we get underneath whatever's on the surface of the conflict to the value, those are things that we really can't disagree with, right? We can't disagree that someone values integrity or achievement or being respectful. And if we can get to a place where we have something in common, that can make the conflict so much more approachable.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for taking some time to dig into this.
I love this so much, Ronnie, and I'm wondering if we could just hold here in this slide, because I notice often in workplace environment conflict, sometimes it's hard work. That is the underlying value that's coming up for someone, and that someone else may not be pulling their weight. And so in understanding your own internal value system is so helpful, because if you're getting a trigger or a bing or a zing about someone else and that they may not be pulling your weight, it may be that one of your like top values is hard work, and that was just modeled to you. It's intrinsic. It might be, brought down from your family of origin. And so, yeah, just taking the time to figure out like, what are my values is it's super helpful. But then because then you can have a little bit more awareness of when you're in conflict. So love this stuff. Thanks for holding for just a second. Okay, let's see if my thing works. No? Yes? Go. I did it. Okay. So we're just gonna hold here move into priming for relationships. And sometimes I like to refer to this as pre-paving how you want to be in your day, or how you want to perform at work, or how you want to feel. And so part of that is really working on your emotional intelligence. And we did this class a while back, and it was a 2-part class. So if you didn't take it, I wonder if you can get access to it. I don't know. Is that even possible? I'm just throwing that out. There's a question. Or do you have to take the class to see it on video? Either way, go ahead, Ronnie.
Oh, what I think I remember Emily saying is that if you registered for it, that you can access the recording.
Okay. Yeah, cool. That's cool. So anyway, boosting your emotional intelligence is really helpful in understanding how you tick. And one of the things that about priming for relationships is figuring out how to do this 5-to-1 ratio of closeness. And that is just what it sounds like. It's sort of like money in the bank, like doing 5 things versus, something maybe that didn't work out. Let's say something happened with your partner and it was, that's your one. Like, let's say you had an argument about the toilet or something like that, or the dishes, or whatever it is. When that happens, when we can shift and make a conscious effort after we've resolved the conflict of putting that money in the bank, doing 5 things that are just going to fill your well back up, fill their well back up, and coming back together in closeness. And the next one on the list is making time for fun. So, a lot of us, we are just working our tails off. We are busy. We are just juggling, work, kids, Mother's Day, everything that has to get done. And making some time for fun. And I like to call this like bracketing. How can you bracket some time this weekend for yourself that's gonna, move you into a state of feeling maybe a little bit of laughter, a little bit of lightness, a little bit of bliss even, or joy. And like making that an intention is just putting money in the bank too for feeling good in your system. The next one, mutual respect. Just like, it's so powerful to feel the respect of another and really feel seen and really feel heard and feel, understood. And when we give that to someone else, I mean, it's a powerful gift. And so once you start like doing this with the other, it just becomes this fun ping pong effect where you can move into a relationship that is really, you're priming for effective communication. And also, just closeness. And so this I'm going to end on this responding for bids of attention. I just did this facilitation yesterday up in Nine Pipes, and this was for nurses. It's National Nurses Week. We want to appreciate them, but they are constantly, giving, and noticing that their patients are doing little bids of attention to get response. And so that happens in our everyday life with all of our relationships. When someone asks for attention or asks for a request, noticing that bid for attention and turning towards it is such a powerful way of creating closeness and building up your relationship. And these are all principles that are under Gottman, and all the research about it is pretty cool. Ronnie, do you have any thoughts on this?
Just a couple, Jen. I think you did a great job of talking about like relationship repair, like when something happens in a relationship and there's an argument or there's a little bit of a rupture, that some of that positivity, some of the things that we can do will help to repair that relationship. And I think that that 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative things that happen, we can do that all the time. Like we can focus on positivity, noticing things that our relationship partners do that we want to appreciate, making time, like Jen was talking about, making time for fun, just paying attention to the positivity, the positive aspects of our relationship can help buffer against some of those negative interactions that happen, because they're inevitable. They're going to happen. And the more positivity we can bank, the more likely we are to be able to successfully weather the little ruptures that are bound to happen.
Yeah, well said. Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about conflict styles, and this is something that that will be covered in the second part of the conflict management training as well. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I'm just going to briefly describe the different conflict styles. We have a couple links here on the bottom of the screen, and these links are also both in the handouts that you were sent in advance. There's a really cool conflict style survey that you can take, and it will tell you like what are your go-to strategies for conflict. When we look at these 5 different methods of conflict, these different conflict styles, we don't typically fall into just one of these categories. We sort of have preferences. So if you're curious after we're done today to take the survey, it's pretty quick. I think it's like 30 questions and it'll give you a sense, but we're going to ask you in just a few minutes if you have a hunch about what your go-to conflict style might be. So if we think about conflict styles in terms of on a continuum from the least cooperative to the most cooperative, we're going to start at the top with the least cooperative conflict style, which is competing. So in this conflict style, you're so concerned with what your own position is and what your desired outcome is that you're really trying to force the other person into agreeing to do what you want them to do or to do things the way that you want them done. So this isn't a very cooperative style because it's really competitive. It's really like trying to get your way. And I think as I describe this, I can definitely relate to feeling like I want to get my way. And I think that that's a pretty universal feeling. We all want to get our way, right? Like we all think our way is the right way, but feeling that way and then engaging in conflict don't have to look the same. I might feel competitive, like I really want this to go a certain way, but I might choose to engage in a different way that is more cooperative. One other way that you might be familiar with, I know that this is pretty common for a lot of people, is avoiding. So if you can identify yourself as a conflict avoider, you're really going to do everything you can to not engage in conflict because it might feel unsafe or it might feel really threatening for a variety of reasons. And so people who tend to adopt this conflict style might withdraw and just really not engage in conflict. But again, the feelings that they have underneath might be very much wanting to engage and very much wanting to stand their ground and work towards a solution, but their actions are communicating avoidance and withdrawal. So going down a little bit more cooperative is accommodating. And this is sort of like smoothing things over. So somebody who's accommodating might give up some of their position. They might agree to things that they don't really want, or not communicate, not advocate for their position because their primary goal is just to smooth things over and have the conflict be resolved. So this would be more in the favor of whoever you're in conflict with. They might get their needs met in the conflict, but you wouldn't, because you'd be accommodating to their needs and their requests. So moving on down the line is compromising. So this is a more cooperative approach where both people are working towards getting some of their needs met while also being willing to give up some of their position. So it's a reconciling type of style where people are working together, knowing that they can't, it can't be a win-win. It's basically going to be a win-lose for both people. They're each going to get something that they want, and they're going to have to give something up. The difference between compromising and collaborating, which is the most cooperative conflict style, is that in collaborating, the goal, and this is an interpersonal goal, I think it's possible that we might come into a conflict having different conflict styles, but in a collaborating style, we're trying to maximize as many of the things that are important to each people and each person in the conflict. So it's a little more cooperative than compromising, because we're not going into the conflict knowing that we are going to have to give up things that are really important to us. We're going to work together to really try to maximize the outcome for everyone involved and have as little that we have to let go of that feels really important. So hearing these brief descriptions about conflict styles, we're going to put a poll up. What's your hunch about your own conflict style? Knowing that the conflict style could be different in different relationships. So that's important to know too, is it might be helpful to you to think about one relationship as you're choosing what you think is your most preferred or your most go-to kind of default conflict style. Okay. Wow, really spread across the board. It looks like the highest percentage chose accommodating. I think that that's pretty common. I don't have data on what are actually the most common conflict styles, but again, I think what's important to know about this is that depending on the type of relationship that you're in, your conflict style might be different. So you might have a different conflict style with your romantic partner, and then a different conflict style with your family members, and a different conflict style at work. I know for me, it's a lot easier for me to approach conflict in a constructive way at work, because that's just one of my roles. And then at home, it's a little bit like I feel a little bit more hesitant, like some family of origin stuff starts coming up and I want to avoid. And it's just so interesting how in different relationships, your conflict style can look different. And also, it's not an all or nothing thing. If you decide to take the conflict style survey, you'll find that your results might look very similar to our group results, where you have percentages of each kind of conflict style, and you'll see like what are your most common approach, what is the most common way you approach conflict, but everybody has a little bit of everything, I think, when it comes to how we approach conflict and with whom we approach conflict with. So I know there's going to be more on this content in part 2 of the conflict management training series, but this just gives you a little preview of how conflict styles can, or knowing our conflict style can help us change them if we want to, and learn skills that will help us be more cooperative when we're approaching conflict.
Thanks so much, Ronnie. Okay, let's see if my computer wants to work. Yay, it does. So yeah, we're gonna build on this Gottman and move into the 4 horsemen and just go through them real quick. And Ronnie, it would be fun. Should we do a demo where we like go back and forth and kind of model?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, that's fun to do. All right, and I'm wondering why the rest of the slide isn't showing up. That's funny. Maybe I have to push a button. Oh, here it is. Can
Sorry
you see
about
that, okay,
that.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I think I did that on accident.
Oh, it's okay. That was fun. I got a little surprise. All right, so let's move into all 4 of these, and these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so if you've been in our other trainings, you've noticed that this is something we've repeated and kind of threaded through. These are the 4 different areas that people tend to move into with conflict, and for many people, there's often more than one that is like just a natural move into that they do in relationship. And often the other person will also move into the opposite of that, of the 4. But yeah, should we start with contempt and just, yeah, I feel like I'll read it. And if you want to be the, you can respond with that piece. Yeah. Okay, well, I love doing this because I get to be a little actress. Ronnie, I would never have forgotten that deadline.
Wow, that makes me feel really defensive, Jen. I wonder how I might respond to that differently. What we're going to be doing here is like Jen's going to be expressing one of the 4 horsemen, and then I'm going to try to say the same thing that she said, but using the antidote. So the antidote to contempt, or a more effective way of communicating, is creating a culture of appreciation. So I'm going to try again to say the same thing that Jen just said, which you might notice that sometimes these things that we're saying might be our internal voice. And what we want is for them not to become our external voice, right? Like if Jen and I are working together and I forgot to do something on time, like her internal voice might be something like, I would never have forgotten that deadline. But there's a process where we can catch ourselves from actually saying that, because saying that could be really damaging to our work relationship, right? So if I were in this situation and I were trying to use the antidote, I could try and create a culture of appreciation where I recognize what Jen might be struggling with that might have contributed to her missing that deadline, and then maybe see how I can come in and make sure that doesn't happen again. So if I were to try again, I might say something like, gosh, Jen, I know you have a lot going on in your life right now, and we missed this deadline. Is there something I can do to help?
Ooh, that felt good. Just and receiving that, even though this hasn't happened in real life, yeah, it's just so softening.
Yeah.
Because when I said I would never have forgotten that deadline, even adding in that word of never is so sharp. And you know, it definitely is like pointing the finger and just like exuding that feeling of contempt towards the other person.
Jen, your facial expression was perfect too, because sometimes contempt is communicated through our facial expressions, like a sneer or an eye roll. It's just, it's really putting yourself above the other person. Like, I'm better than you. I never would have done what you did. And that is not relationship building. It's actually quite destructive. I think contempt is actually the most destructive of all of the horsemen.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
can I just make one more comment about, you know, you kind of mentioned the face, and I just wanted to make a comment real quick about our verbiage back and forth. We think it's just words, and that's like 30% of our communication, but really our what we communicate through our body, through our voice, through our face, through our eyes, through our tone, to the way we hold our arms, that is 70% of our communication when you are moving back and forth with another person. And so yeah, we think it's just words, but it's actually, people are reading much more than that and communicating.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just had to throw that in.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second horseman, criticism, this is when we're being critical of something about the person's character. So there's a difference between making a comment that is specific to their behavior versus making a comment that is sort of generalized to their entire character. So if I were to make a comment to Jen, like, you are so disorganized, I'm really generalizing that comment to her whole person. Everything about her is disorganized. So the antidote to this is
can I
call it complaining. Yeah. Can I just explain it really quick?
Yeah, sorry, I'm so excited.
No, that's okay. So I call it complaining. Sometimes it's referred to as like I statements followed by a request. I think that complaining makes sense because it's specific. Like, if I'm complaining about something, it's specific about a behavior as opposed to generalized to the whole person. So Jen's going to try it again.
Okay. I'm going to give it a shot. All right. You know, Ronnie, I just feel frustrated when the dirty dishes are in the sink. Could you please do the dishes tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do the dishes. That doesn't put me on the defensive because Jen isn't telling me I'm a slob. Right?
Yeah, and I'm owning what is happening in my internal experience and saying an I statement such as, you know, I'm just feeling frustrated when the dirty dishes are in the sink. And so I'm also pointing at what it is. It's the dirty dishes in the sink. It's not her that she is just embodying all disorganizement, but yeah, it's like ownership on my feeling and also pointing the finger at what the situation is instead of the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful.
All right.
Yeah. So we'll move into defensiveness.
Yeah, I think you're up.
Okay. Yeah. So defensiveness. Oh, yeah, we know this one, right? Defensiveness is just that wall that instantly goes up and you can feel it in your system that you need to defend and move into a place that is, you know, you barrier yourself in some ways. And so when we move into that, we often, you know, find that we're also projecting, I don't want to know what you're saying right now. And, you know, just definitely moving into protection. And so with this one, yeah, should I read it to you and you can move into the antidote?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. It isn't my fault we didn't get the grant.
Yeah, so Jen is feeling defensive. Maybe I've accused her of not doing something that she needed to do in order to get a grant that we applied for. And so the antidote to this is accepting responsibility, even if you only can take responsibility for a really small part. Like we talk about this with couples a lot, that blame is so easy to place on one person. And really, even if there's a very, very small piece that we can accept responsibility for, that can help the relationship and the conflict move to a more collaborative place. Mm-hmm. So if I were to try to accept responsibility for this statement, I might say something like, gosh, that was a really complicated application. And I should have read through the call for proposals a little bit more carefully so that we were working on this together. And maybe next time we can schedule some specific time where we can sit down together and look at the application so that next time we're more successful.
Ooh, that's so nice. That just was very calming to me.
Well, it reminds me when we talked in the very beginning about like trying to take a we perspective towards things, like we're going to work together to make sure that this does, or to try again. We're going to work together to try to do better next time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Even if the fault is mostly one person's responsibility, you know, if we can share a little bit of that, I think that moves the conflict forward, moves the relationship forward.
Yes. Beautiful.
Okay,
right.
so
stonewalling.
The last one is stonewalling. So stonewalling is really just like avoiding, walking out. Like I might be upset about something that Jen just said to me, and I'm going to storm out of the room, slam the door. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a statement of like projecting, you know, no, basically, and leaving. And so it's usually not very helpful with the other person, because then that also can give rise to a feeling within them. This is actually something I've been working on. Like I will just avoid, and I will leave. And so this is something that I've noticed is something that I can work on a little bit more. And so, go ahead if you want to. I guess you don't have to say anything. You just did it.
Yeah. And really I think what's important to know about this is that what you might observe in someone else who stonewalls is that they're just like storming out and shutting down. But what's really happening underneath is that they're completely flooded, like they're overwhelmed. And that feels like their only option is to just check out and leave. So I think knowing that and being able to recognize that in yourself when you feel yourself wanting to stonewall is a really important thing, because that is the antidote, is recognizing the overwhelm and trying to calm yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, one thing I've been practicing, if I feel flooded and overwhelmed and just like you know, with teenagers, this can happen. It can be very frustrating. Um, just in saying, you know what, oh, taking a breath, you know, I am feeling really overwhelmed right now. I'm just gonna go take a 20-minute walk around the block and come back.
Yeah. That last part, Jen, is really key. That if you're taking a break, that you communicate that that's what you need, and you also commit to coming back, because it's okay to take a break, but it's, if you don't come back, then you're just stonewalling still, right? Like you have to agree to come back and engage in the conversation, and it communicates to whoever you're in conflict with that you care and that you want to work this out.
Yes. Yeah, because if you just leave and walk out, that you know, you just exonerated all this power and then leave, and the other person feels pretty powerless. Sometimes people can feel abandoned, you know, and so by just saying, ooh, like identifying your emotion, whatever it is, or I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm just gonna like take a moment to just go sit out on the porch and breathe, and then I'm gonna be back, okay?
Thanks, Jen, for going through those things with me.
Thank you. All right. Well, let's move on. Okay, here we go.
All right, so we're going to talk about some intrapersonal methods for managing conflict. And you'll notice some overlap here with things that we've already discussed, because sometimes these strategies are both intra, which means internal to ourselves, and inter with someone else. So sometimes we can be using some of these internal or intrapersonal strategies to influence our interpersonal interactions with someone else. So I'm going to review some of the things that we've already talked about in a little bit more detail, and then we're going to shift to interpersonal strategies. So this is sort of like the precursor. Keep these things in mind as you're thinking about how you might approach the other person who you're in conflict with. So we talked about the positive perspective, and we were talking about positive sentiment override. What positive sentiment override is the overall feeling that you have about a relationship. Like if I think about my friend Brooke, when I think about her, I feel happy. Like I think of memories that we've shared. I think of things that we've done together, times that we've laughed. Like there's a lot of positivity in that relationship. But if I think about someone who I've had constant conflict with, or who is really challenging in my life, I kind of even feel it in my chest when I think about that person. Like, oh, this person is filled, this relationship is filled with a lot of stress and angst. And so if we're thinking about how we can create and build positivity in our relationships, the more we can approach our relationships with positivity and think about the things that about that relationship that we can appreciate and build on, the more we're going to be able to engage in constructive conflict, because they're relationship serving thoughts, right? If I think about someone who is just really difficult for me to work with, and we never agree on anything, and every time I'm with them, I just feel like I'm being challenged, I'm thinking about myself. I'm taking a self-serving bias where all of my thoughts are around, oh, I just don't like to be with this person. They just challenge me and in not good ways. And I just feel like I always have to defend myself. Like that's a very self-serving bias that I have with that relationship, versus I'm going to go into this and I'm going to notice the things about this person I appreciate and the contributions that they make. And I'm going to figure out how to work together with them and recognize the strengths that they bring, and that those strengths might be different than the strengths that I bring. That's more of a relationship serving bias. Okay, so the positive perspective can help us to adopt a more relationship serving bias, so that when we enter into difficult conversations, we're doing so with the goal of collaboration and cooperation, and not with competition, if we think back to the conflict styles. All right, so we went over the 5-to-1 magic ratio of positive to negative interactions. If we can maintain positivity in our relationships, that will buffer our relationships from the negativity, from conflict. It doesn't mean we won't have conflict. It means that when there is conflict, we'll be able to work through it more effectively because there's enough positivity and mutual respect in the relationship for us to be able to approach those conflicts as a team or as a united force or a collaboration. We talked a little bit about self-soothing, how breathing and taking a break and just bringing some awareness to how you feel in your body. Sometimes naming how we're feeling can be a source of self-soothing. And this is the antidote to flooding. And flooding is what happens when we stonewall. So flooding is like that feeling of overwhelm where you just got to get out of here. You might feel your heart racing. You might feel your breath being really shallow. It's just a sign that you're feeling overwhelmed or flooded, and self-soothing is the antidote to those feelings. Mindfulness, engaging in mindfulness practice, maybe during your alone time or engaging in a regular mindfulness practice, maybe even during work breaks during the day, can just help us feel more grounded and able to enter into conflict in a more grounded and regulated way. I always think about breathing as your most underutilized skill. Like, we do it to survive, and it's really the most effective way to help regulate our emotions when we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious. So don't forget to bring attention to your breathing and how that can help you to regulate yourself when you're in a difficult conversation or thinking about approaching a difficult conversation. And then accepting influence. When we can be open to our relationship partner's perspective, knowing that we can listen and not give up our bones, not give up our perspective, that can really be relationship serving. Sometimes we get so stuck in our own perspective that we can't listen to another person's perspective. We might fear that if we do listen to what they have to say, that we have to give something up in order to do that. And when we can just listen, we might accept some influence from our partners. We might not, but really accepting influence, especially in romantic relationships, is one of the big predictors of a relationship being able to maintain, is that partners accept influence from each other. So this generalizes to a lot of different kinds of relationships, but particularly important in romantic relationships.
Awesome. Thanks, Ronnie. I love this deep dive into intrapersonal and interpersonal. So let's move into the dynamics between two people or a group even. And yeah, we're just going to zone in first a little bit on words. And actually, the next slide kind of goes into this. So I'm just going to circle back to that in just a minute. But notice that our language and the words that we use are really powerful. And so in learning different strategies of noticing which words might be more triggering or create more dissension is helpful. And I'll go over those in the next slide. But moving into a gentle startup, that was kind of like the first thing we started talking about today, is like priming for this, like pre-paving how you want to be. And, if you're noticing that you're feeling dysregulated and that your amygdala has been activated and you're feeling flooded or whatever it is, that's probably not the time to try to connect. We know that when our nervous systems are regulated, when we're moving into parasympathetic, that's the place for solutions. That's the place for time to connect. And so a gentle startup is, kind of preparing yourself to be in a good space internally, but before you go into it. Because when you do a harsh startup, it's just what it sounds like. It usually doesn't lead, it just leads to just more of this back and forth. So
Jen, can I just say really quick, we have
Yeah.
several different examples coming up of what a gentle startup might look like, and we've applied it to different types of relationships. So we're just giving you kind of a preview right now of all the interpersonal methods that we're going to be reviewing in the next little bit.
Yes, totally. Thanks, Ronnie. Yeah, and so moving into active listening skills, and we've talked about this in our other trainings. There's so many ways to listen, and, you know, listening to respond right away, or listening to understand is such a powerful thing to hold. Like we know, you know, sometimes you're like just waiting for that person to stop talking so you can get your thought in there. You're not really listening then. You're in the space of trying to formulate and then be right. And I know it feels so good to be right. I mean, it's kind of delicious to feel I am right. And it's so helpful in managing conflict to just listen and really try to absorb what the other person is sharing. And active listening skills, there's so many things to lean into right there. It's the way you hold your body, it's eye contact, it's being able to maybe even figure out like what is the emotion happening for this person, or what is their need underlining. That's a little bit more advanced, but even if you can just summarize like, oh, I'm hearing you say you're super frustrated, and even if they say, you know, no, I'm actually mad. Isn't that helpful in that you can say, oh, okay, this is so helpful that you're sharing this to me. And so active listening skills is really trying to understand the other person's perspective. Moving into like the idea of rupture and repair, and you know, this happens in relationships, it happens in the workplace, it happens with mother-in-laws, and you know, all across the board there can be a rupture within a relationship. And so moving towards repair with the other person is really a powerful thing to do. And there's a lot of different parts of that, and we'll go into that more, but repair moves into, you know, figuring out what your underlying need is, what theirs is, and then maybe even moving into a request of something that might be needed by the other person. And sometimes those requests, they don't get fulfilled. The other person can't or won't do that. And so one of the things you can always move into is, how can I give this need I have to myself? You know, what part of this conflict is something I can actually like chew on and give to myself? So yeah, rupture and repair, we'll go into that more, but we also covered it in some of our other classes. If you've done those, you can review there. Self-soothing. So when we're in conflict with another, noticing, you know, like if we're tensing up, if we're starting to feel flooded, whatever it is, that's the time to, you know, just what Ronnie was saying, move into maybe taking a deep breath. I think I'll do it right now. How about we all do it? Let's just self-soothe for a sec. Breathing is just so powerful. And when we take that deep breath, or even do box breathing, or even if we take a moment before to hum, when you hum, you activate your vagus nerve, which runs up and down your spinal column. And they've done these neat research on little kindergartners and preschoolers. They're just walking around humming. And it's actually a form of self-regulation, and they're moving their little bodies into parasympathetic and just regulating. So any way you can self-soothe yourself when you're either in conflict or even before, you can set yourself up for success. And finally, yeah, compromise. And, you know, Ronnie just like beautifully outlined that. And the other one, that when we can, you know, move to understand the other person's perspective and see what we can chew on and how we can give for the other, that moves into a deeper relationship, and people feel heard, people feel seen, and the relationship can also move into another level of vulnerability. Any other thoughts, Ronnie?
No, we're gonna dig into each of these bullets a little bit more in the next few minutes. And if anybody needs to take a break to just step away and grab some coffee or take a restroom break, please feel free to do that. We'll be here when you get back.
Yes, totally. All right. Well, I'm going to move into words. So the power of words. All right. So these are different words that we've noticed that can either create a connection or not. Shoulding. So who here has ever heard being shoulded on, or I just got shoulded on by someone? Ronnie has. Yeah. So yeah, how does that feel, Ronnie, if I say, you know, you should really maybe get your teeth brightened?
Oh, it sounds so judgmental.
Yeah. Or Ronnie, you should maybe clean your car. You need to. Yeah, it doesn't feel good. And so even when I did it, I just felt gross inside. Sorry, Ronnie, I love you.
It's so out of character for you.
But yeah, so shoulding either of other people, it's definitely like finger wagging, and it moves into judgment. And usually, you know, for being on the other end of that, it doesn't feel good. So noticing the word should and how it may come out in your language is something just to nod at. And you know what? We all say should. It's like in our culture, it's in the media, it's in TV, it's, you know, us, we all say this word. So I just want to like soften this a little bit and give yourself some grace that once you notice that these words are prevalent in your vocabulary, yeah, it's just a noticing and then a softening of that word. And so, yeah, you can also not only should others, but should yourself. And that's very common of people moving through the day and just moving into, oh, I should work out. Oh, I should go like, you know, bake a cake for my mom and not buy one. Yeah, there's so many ways we can move into shoulding ourselves. And really, it's the same concept. Ronnie, I remember a class that I took of yours like 4 years ago where you outlined shoulding. And you said, you know, it's kind of like SHIT on yourself. And sorry, that's a bad word. And sorry if that's not okay to say in a class, but I got it when you outlined it in that class. Like it kind of is. It's like poop, you know, on yourself. And so just in noticing that. All right, so let's move into always and never. So always and never, there are these words that, you know, they tend to be pretty black and white. There's not much room in between always and never. It's very fixed. And so when you say to, you know, your partner, you always leave the toilet seat up, there's not much space in there of possibility or the spectrum of what else actually your partner may do. You know, they might put it down sometimes. So just in noticing that when you say always and never, it's pretty black and white. There's not much room for like possibility. And when people hear that word coming at them, you never take out the garbage. It's sort of it's an affirmation that okay, usually that person's like, yeah, maybe I don't want to. I'm going to fulfill that wish of, you know, this idea that you're saying of me. That can happen for people. It also can bring up defensiveness. It can often move into just not being able to connect. And so in noticing always and never language, it's just that kind of very black and white. Let's move into but. So but is another word. Man, we all use this word. I mean, it's hard not to. It's just like pervasive. And I'm wondering if anyone has a friend that has ever said to them, girl, I just love you so much, but whatever it is. Everything you say before but just gets negated. So even though maybe my girlfriend was trying to tell me, I just love you, but, you know, I'm not gonna even embody that love or believe her, because everything that comes after that is what I hear. And we usually, our brains hear the negative so much louder than the positive things. And so even though someone might be trying to be helpful by saying something nice before a but, it usually doesn't land. And so any way that you can replace the word but with and is just a powerful way of just softening information and giving that extra little help with that. Okay, I'm noticing the time, so I'm going to keep moving. So the other word is why. And this was another word, Ronnie in the class, oh gosh, I can't remember which one it was, but it was so amazing when you outlined why and how it can create just an instant defensiveness in the other. And so, yeah, when you say to someone, why would you do that? Why were you late? Why are you wearing that outfit? You know, it's just, for the other person, it's just an instant like, oh, I need to protect myself from this person, because that why statement is just sharp and pointed. And so any way you can move into these other things that I have below here is just softer in communicating. And so using I wonder, I'm curious, yeah, you know, Ronnie, I'm curious. You've come late 3 days in a row, and I'm wondering, is there anything, you know, going on, or is anything I can help with? That's, you know, I'm just checking in. You know, that is so much softer than saying, why are you late? Also moving into I need instead of you should. Noticing what your need is in the moment and not pointing the finger. And, you know, gratitude. I mean, come on, gratitude is the best. Any way we can move into appreciation of the other, when people get to feel that feeling of like, oh yeah, you know, I actually know that Ronnie really appreciates that I do X, Y, or Z, whatever it is, because she tells me, and I get to like, I want to like live up to that too, because you know, she's appreciating something in me, and I want to like feel that appreciation. It feels so good. I've just been talking. Ronnie, do you have anything else to add with these?
No, I love how you described the power of words, and anytime we can just stop ourselves and choose our words more wisely, that's just going to move the conversation forward. Thanks, Jen.
Bet. Okay. Let me catch my breath and drink some water.
All right, so I'm going to review gentle startup, and then we have some examples that we'll move through kind of quickly that will help you understand the difference between a harsh startup and a gentle startup. So some of the key components of starting a conversation in a gentle way that will make the people that you're talking with more receptive to hearing you is to start with I and stay with I instead of you. So some examples: I would love to spend more time with you, instead of, you don't care that we haven't been on a date for 3 months. Okay, like it's using my own need and taking responsibility for what it is that's important to me instead of making an accusation. So it can be being specific about an event or an action without blaming or criticizing. So remember, complaining is the antidote to criticism. If I have a complaint, if Jen and I have not spent any friend time in the last 3 months and I feel like she's been ignoring me, I could say, you've been ignoring me. You don't think that our friendship is important anymore. That would be a criticism, as opposed to, I really miss having our weekly talks. Can we make a plan to get together sometime soon? Like complaining, expressing a positive need through a specific complaint or a specific request is more effective. We want to be concise and specific. We don't want to go on and on, because the more we say, the less our partners listen. The more concise we can be, the more clear we are in communicating. And then we want to describe what's happening without analyzing what it means or assigning some judgment to it. We may not know the reason. Like if I go back to this example with Jen, with feeling ignored by Jen, if I just describe what's happening, that I'm feeling like I miss getting together and I'm feeling like we're a little distant lately. That's a description of what I think is happening. And I'm not saying to her, you don't value our friendship anymore, or you don't think that I'm not important to you anymore. That's that's analyzing what might be happening for her that I don't really know or understand yet. We want to talk clearly about our needs, be really specific about that, be polite and give appreciation, which again, remember, is the antidote to contempt. And then notice, Jen was mentioning the thank you and, like, noticing what your partner, whether they're your romantic partner or your coworker, your friend, what they do well, and let them know about that. Mm-hmm. So we're going to move pretty quickly through some examples that will illustrate what a potential harsh startup might look like in different types of relationships and what a gentle alternative might be for each of those scenarios.
Yeah. All right, well, let's just jump right into a harsh startup. And, I think this is so common in the workplace. But yeah, noticing, hey, you didn't contribute anything on this project. I did all the work. Ooh, that is such a good example of a harsh startup. And so a soft alternative is really, is moving into what we were just talking about, these I statements. I just appreciate your knowledge, your expertise, and I really miss that from you on this project. Are you willing to meet with me so we can make a plan to include you for contributions? I felt, even as I was saying that I wanted to be softer in my system. Like, my voice changed. I naturally moved into just feeling more regulated in my body. And so noticing that when you do a harsh startup, that actually amps your system. And so when you feel amped, usually, people, emotional intelligence, they can feel that energy coming at them. And so using a softer approach or a gentle startup is super helpful.
Jen, there's so much that I noticed about this particular statement and the way you said it. You used an I statement. You expressed gratitude. You noticed something that your coworker was doing well and let them know what that was. You expressed a feeling and you made a request, like all in these 2 sentences. So all of the things that we're reviewing about how you create a gentle startup, you did all of those things here.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, they're all covered in this. And I just want to, point out that, this is a skill. This is a new skill being learned. And that, even if you just do 1 or 2 of these pieces, it's going to feel a lot better. So we're kind of showing you like the most wonderful, hopeful thing that can happen in this way. But, we're just all fumbling through. We're humans. Everyone's going to just keep figuring it out. This is like a new muscle that's being built upon. And so just notice it. It's okay to make mistakes. And sometimes when I make a mistake with, especially something like a harsh startup, and then I catch myself, I'll say, oh, wait, can we start over? I just got really amped in my system, and can I just say that over again? I'm sorry. And so, when you do that, when you catch yourself and you let the other person know, I just, didn't do that very well. Can I try again? It usually helps soften for the other person too, because you've moved into vulnerability and you're sharing, I'm working on this, I'm working on it. That can help the other person have a little bit more softness too.
All right. So here's an example from a potentially friendship relationship. Your friend forgot an important date. So harsh startup, how could you forget my birthday? I never forget something that's important to you. So soft and alternative, obviously this person's feelings are hurt. Their friend has forgotten something that's important to them. My feelings are really hurt that you forgot my birthday. Is there something going on for you? Is there something on your mind that you want to talk about? So given this person the benefit of the doubt, like if I have positive sentiment override in my friendship, my first assumption is not going to be that they don't love me enough to remember my birthday. My assumption is going to be like, this person cares about me. And if they forgot my birthday, there must be a really good reason. And I want to be available to to hear what that reason might be.
Yeah. Yeah. That one really jumps out to me, Ronnie, about values. You know, one of the people here might have really, birthdays might not have been an important part of their life. And the other person might be like, you know, maybe their parents made a big deal about birthdays. And so in recognizing that we each have different value systems, even with everything from like birthdays and gifts and holidays, it's helpful for understanding the other and also understanding your own internal response.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go on to the next one. All right. So this one is about you wish your partner would take you out to dinner or a friend or whatever, so you don't have to cook. And so the harsh startup, oh, notice this. Ooh, there's a never word. You never take me out anymore. So sick of doing all the cooking. So that is a really good example of moving into like a black and white statement. And so the softening of that is, you know, is noticing, just I'm getting tired of cooking every night. It would be really nice if we could just go out tomorrow. And so there's so many pieces of that. You're saying a nice statement, you're letting someone else know what the feeling is. And also, you know, it's a request that's really soft. It would be really nice if we could go out tomorrow. And so it's an open-ended in the way that there could be a collaboration there in some sense. Right.
All right, so we're going to move on to active listening. And Jen, I'm aware of the time, and so I'm wondering if it would be okay with you if we skip the demo so we can make sure to leave some time for questions. Does that sound okay to you? I think we have about 20 minutes left, everybody, and then we'll open it up to some questions before we wrap up at 11.
Yeah, good plan. High five.
Okay. So we've talked about active listening a little bit already, but really, I think that the take-home message here is to listen to understand instead of listen to respond. And the way that we communicate understanding is through reflection. What can we notice in what our partners are saying to us that we can reflect back to them? Maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a value, maybe it's just content. Like maybe we just need to reflect back what we heard so that they feel as though we're actually listening. Sometimes we might not agree with what our people and who we're in relationship with have to say, and that's okay. We don't have to agree in order to validate. And so we might say something like, it makes sense to me that, or I understand that you feel that way because that's not a communication that we agree or that we're willing to give up any of our own needs or values or position on an issue. It's just a communication that we're hearing and we're listening and we're understanding. And that communicating understanding can help people be more open to compromise. So we want to ask questions only to deepen our understanding and not to push our position forward, okay, or make our case for whatever our stake is in the conflict. So really just reflecting, listening to understand, and finding something in what our partner is communicating to us that we can relate to, not necessarily agree with, but relate to.
Yeah. All right. And so, yeah, that's just so perfect, Ronnie, how you outlined active listening and how, you know, things are going to happen. We are human. We are going to make mistakes. You know, there's going to be a mistake. You're going to make a mistake. And so what you do with that mistake is really, you know, what matters. And humility is just this amazing, value to move into that's really a strength. And when you can be with someone else that's upset and be able to just soften yourself and try to like lay down whatever it is your point of view is, to really listen and move into you know, just like what you were saying, Ronnie, with the listen to understand instead of listening to respond. This is, I love this, what you put in here, the freedom from pride and arrogance. Yeah, when we just soften our ego a little bit and move into trying to understand the other, then we can move into repair. And then we can also we create vulnerability with the other person. And when we do this, when we move into vulnerable places, we can move through really hot spots with a bigger heart, with more understanding, with more softness. And that vulnerability piece is really a powerful key into connecting with the other and also for communicating. Anything else with this, Ronnie?
Just want to point out that this link at the bottom of the screen is also in your handout, and it's to a great article called The Role of Humility at Work and Why the Best Leaders Embrace It. So if you're interested in learning more about the role that humility plays, especially in the workplace, read that article. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. And I just want to share, I just recently went through something with a girlfriend, and, in pre-paving and also priming myself for that conversation that I knew was going to be tough. I tried to really soften myself before I met with her. I did a 10-minute just mindfulness meditation, and I did some breathing, and I also tried to kind of picture that both of us we love each other, and I know we can work through this, and try to understand what is her need underneath all of this. Trying to understand the other person's perspective and actually what it is below the motion, because our thoughts are always tethered to an emotion, and our emotions are, they live in our systems. So underneath that system of emotion is usually the need. And so in noticing that, oh yeah, she's upset with me, and it's, we haven't been connecting, we haven't been hanging out. And I'm wondering if the need here is possibly that she feels abandoned and she wants more time with me because, I got a new boyfriend, so I'm just spending all my time with him, in trying to take on the other person's perspective. And even if you're wrong, just trying to understand where they're coming from, you can move into these conversations with a little bit more humility, and not coming in hot that you just want to get your say in. And so that's a little piece on humility that I just practiced this week. Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. I think it's so important to just normalize that we will make mistakes, and we will not get it right the first time, and that sometimes an important part of relationship repair in lots of different settings is apologizing. That when we take responsibility for ourselves and our actions, and we practice humility, that an apology can be really, really powerful. And the skills of apologizing well are pretty simple, but also really hard to enact, because what we want to do is to be right, and it's hard to admit when we're wrong. And even when we're wrong, the tendency can be to want to make excuses to justify what we did. And so there's a great book called On Apology by Aaron Lazar, and he outlines, it's hard to believe you can write a whole book about apology, but you can, and it's really good. In the book, he outlines these 5 steps of how to apologize well. And we can do this really simply. Like, the 5 steps don't need to equate to a 10-minute conversation or a really long, drawn-out apology. It's really just a matter of acknowledging what you did that was wrong, like being specific, accepting responsibility for that, offering an explanation if that's something that the person who you're apologizing to needs. It may not be something they need, and it's not an excuse. Sometimes an explanation can turn into an excuse or a justification, and then that sort of negates the apology. Making reparations if possible, and then committing to better behavior. So if I'm just going to give you a quick example, and then we want you to think about something that you feel like you might need to apologize for that you're willing to share. We're going to invite you to prepare an apology using the above guidelines, and then we're going to give you a 5 minutes to practice and break out into small groups before we wrap it up today. We just have a couple more slides. So let's say that I forgot Jen's birthday. Oh, the apology book. Somebody's asking who's the author. It's Aaron Lazar. I'll put that in the chat so that everybody can see it. So let's say that I forgot Jen's birthday. Her birthday was just last week, so I might have. I didn't because she told me, but I might have otherwise. I might apologize by saying, like, Jen, I'm really, really sorry that I forgot your birthday. I accept full responsibility for it. You're my friend, and I shouldn't have forgotten your birthday. I would really like to take you out to lunch in the next couple weeks and make up for that. And if that's something that you're open to, and in the future, I'm going to put your birthday on my calendar, and I'm going to set a reminder to myself to make sure that that doesn't happen again, because life gets busy sometimes, and I don't want things that happen in life to get in the way of me remembering your birthday. So pretty simple. Like, I kind of hold off on offering an explanation because I think that can so often lead to an excuse. How did that feel to you, Jen?
It was amazing. And I also thought to myself, oh, yay, my birthday gets to keep going past this week. So yay me. Yeah, it felt really lovely. Yeah. Okay. And it's amazing how quickly you hit all those points.
Yeah, it doesn't have to
them. It doesn't have to be this long, you know, intense. Yeah, that was clean.
So we're going to give you just a couple minutes before we send you into breakout rooms, we're going to leave the screen up for a minute so that you can look at the steps as you're constructing your own apology for something. I mean, don't pick something huge, pick something that, you know, is approachable in this moment that you're willing to share, because we're going to send you off into breakout rooms to share these apologies and just process a little bit of this concept. But before we do that, we're just going to give you a moment. Try writing it down, typing it out, whatever feels doable to you. Try and acknowledge the wrong, accept responsibility. We'll leave it to you whether or not you choose to offer an explanation. Just make sure that it doesn't get into the realm of making an excuse or a justification for whatever you did. Offer to make a reparation if that's possible, and then commit to better behavior. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you got a chance to practice a good apology. I think making a good apology is just a really, really useful skill. So thanks for trying that on, and keep those little steps handy and practice those, because a good apology can be really powerful.
Yeah, so just keeping on time, I'm going to move us into self-soothing. But before I do, I just wanted to invite you to maybe in the chat box, let us know, you know, what came up for you. Let us know that when you're feeling overwhelmed or dysregulated. Oh, wait. Yeah, let us know about what came up for you with the repair and with doing an apology. And so that anything that you want to throw in the chat box, I'm just going to talk while you do that a little bit about ways that we can self-soothe. And so box breathing is such an easy little concept you can do right in your chair if you're at work. And I love having a visual. I'm a visual learner, so it's just helpful to notice, okay, it's just moving like a box, taking a deep breath in, holding for 4 seconds, and then exhaling for 4 seconds, kind of slowly, and then doing it again. And that just helps move us into parasympathetic. The other self-soothing is just taking a break, you know, and committing to return back to the conversation at a different time. And that is what we talked about earlier with the Gottman, with stonewalling, and just that's the antidote for that piece right there. All right, so let's move on.
All right, so just talking a little bit about compromise, because compromise really is, it's one of the conflict styles, compromising. One of the more cooperative conflict styles, not the most, if you remember, collaborating is the most cooperative conflict style. However, compromise is just a really helpful goal, whether you're looking at conflict or any other kind of relationship challenge that you're facing. So when we're thinking about compromise, we're each reflecting on areas of flexibility. So if you're in a conflict with someone that you're in a relationship with, where are you each willing to bend, and what areas are absolutely inflexible? So if you can communicate what areas you feel more flexible in and what areas are the most important, that can be a really helpful strategy in working towards compromising. We talked about being able to identify something that your relationship partner is communicating or expressing to you that you can agree with or relate to. How can you each be clear about what you agree about? What can you connect on in this conflict that can help you work towards compromise? And that can help you identify what common goals will help you work towards that compromise and how you can work together to accomplish those shared goals. Sometimes it's a matter of identifying a temporary compromise, like what is something that we can do right now that can help us work towards a more long-term compromise. Sometimes they can be really small things. What are some feelings that we share? What are some things, again, that we can relate to in each other, that we can help to just get underneath that conflict and get more in touch with what is the value, what is the bones, what is at the core of this conflict for each of us. And sometimes that can help us to identify some more shared values or some more shared feelings. Mm-hmm. And how can we work together to help us identify and meet the deeper need within the conflict? So sometimes you're not going to be able to meet the need of the other person, and sometimes they won't be able to meet your need. But if we can identify and connect with those needs, we can both help to support the needs that our partners identify and work to meet our own needs when others can't do that for us. So we're taking responsibility for our own needs in the conflict and trying to understand and relate and connect with what our partner's needs are also, so that we can work towards compromise. So these are some bigger concepts that we hope you've gained some skills to be able to manage conflict more effectively throughout our training today. And we really appreciate your participation and your engagement today. And we have a few minutes left for questions. If you have some questions, we have about 5 minutes left. And we're also curious what some of your takeaways are. So if there are things that really stood out to you about today that you want to either shout out or put in the chat box, we'd really love to hear from you.
I'll just mention what I mentioned to the gals while you were in the breakout room, is I love this kind of training because it gives you a lot of little things you can do that can make a big difference. So even if there's one piece that stuck out that you can use in a conversation this weekend, it helps me, and then I just keep adding to that list of new skills, and very, very beneficial.
I see that Donnie commented in the chat a moment ago, the idea that both sides often, not always, have parts in the conflict. And it's hard if your apology doesn't always prompt an apology from the other side. That's so true. I mean, sometimes an apology will influence the other person to also apologize, but that isn't always true. And so I think one of the things, like my reaction to this, and something that I often go into a conflict keeping in mind, is that I only have responsibility. I can only take responsibility for my part in the conflict or in the interaction. And I can't control what the other person is going to do or say or think or feel. That is really helpful to me, just feeling like I can maintain my integrity in how I approach any interaction. But I think also just keeping in mind that we can influence our interactions by how we enter into those conflicts. So we can't control, but we can influence. Elijah says, I found the skills for stonewalling useful because I had no resources for that before. Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Thank you. And thank you for the positive feedback, Teresa. We're going to see you in a couple weeks. Teresa's our next presenter. Okay, let's see. Belinda says, love all the skills when working with people in groups and in life. Alyssa, needed new skills, both in work and personal life. Thank you, Alyssa, for that feedback. Anybody have any questions for us in our last couple minutes?
Yeah, just a reminder that there's resources that that you have access to, and you can get a wealth of information about all of these things and just take a deep dive into all. We're sort of like quickly skimming everything, that we can bring, but yeah, tap in some more if you're curious. And yeah, we're so grateful for everyone showing up today, and I just again, want to just extend my gratitude to Em for helping with technology. You know, I often come in feeling like, oh my gosh, I hope I can manage this okay. And you're always just so helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And everyone, again, thanks for attending. I will make sure you get the slides. And when the recording is ready to go, we'll send that out as well. And we'll see you again on May 26th. The same Zoom link will work, and you'll see a reminder email from me that day like you did today.